Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast. We've got you stories, and you just need to turn off your cell phones and put your trays in the upright and locked position. I'm, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. All right, here's our little rundown, our sequel to A New Dawn. Our warriors, our characters, our warriors have made it, possibly the villain, have made it over into the giant's world to try and figure out what is up, right? There's sort of nomadic existence as the world is in pretty much a lot of chaos because of the destruction of the firmament, maybe something else, we don't know yet. The magic style introduces a creature-like thing, kind of like you could say bacteria that can create any kind of thing you want. It's a brewing-based magic system. And we further expounded that the bacterias, the creatures, are pretty much like the engines of creation. They're what the deity used to make the world, and we can use them to make anything we want as long as we feed them the right mixture of things. And then the pantheon of this world, anyways, was a pair of people who found the giant suits and basically through violence and lying made people believe that they were gods. That seem correct to you, Reed?
Yep.
Okay, so that's where we're starting with. We're going to do some more world building, and then we'll jump into what the purpose of the story is. What story elements did you guys have? I had fighting style.
I have reoccurring character.
I have villain.
Great. Who should go first? Seth, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So the villain is partly the villain from last time, but not exactly. The villain is actually the villain's sidekick from last time.
Quincy.
Whereas Quincy. And the villain, we never gave him a name, but Clyde. Clyde will be his name. And he's kind of taken a role over here, almost like Peter in the Ender's Game series.
Right.
Where later on he kind of, what's that?
Peter Wiggin.
Yeah, Peter Wiggin, where he is kind of the antagonist character of Ender at first and is kind of a terrible guy, but is, the right guy for the job for,
Right.
kind of whatever it is. And so the villain from the last one comes over and, has set himself up somewhat benevolently as, a kind of a unifying messiah figure, trying to get some of these kind of roving bands of people kind of unified into something coherent.
Right.
But I think our heroes come over and it's like they might need his aid at some point or work with him, but it's like they just don't trust him. Like, it's like, okay, you had these bad intentions, but like, are you really kind of reformed? But anyway, so he could turn out to be bad again or not. But the villain would be his sidekick from the last one, Quincy, who in the last one would have been fairly innocent and just kind of I'm in it for science, I'm doing this for science, and this is where the science is, and but kind of by the end, and when they hop over, is kind of got himself demented, where he's been doing human experiments and just kind of lots of war crime stuff.
Yeah, that tends to twist the brain a little bit.
Yeah, and so that's kind of where he's come to. He's basically pulled most of the entourage that the villain had with himself and has kind of set himself up as a kind of a counter despot, setting up...
To the villain from the last story.
Correct. Kind of picking up on, a lot of the, quote-unquote outcasts. I think we set up last time because the guy at the top of the mountain had been sending... these people over, right? When they'd come up to fight him, and they'd either give him their skill and knowledge, or he would send them over to this other place to kind of establish an airhead and see what's going on. And so he's been doing that for, I don't know, several millennia. And so then the culture that's risen up has just been like roving band of like surviving explorer, fighter.
Master swordsman.
Yeah, and so they kind of have this idea that, remember your oaths, and, the people, the oath breakers, the ones that have forgotten get kind of cast out, maybe they get branded, they might all kind of fight each other, but if they're certain code of ethics and moral standards of, their mission that, they've been sworn to do or whatever, kind of gets trespassed on or whatever, they get branded and kind of cast off.
Absolutely.
And that's what Quincy is kind of gathering around himself, kind of the, these outcasts and these kind of, reestablished his diabolical, tortures and science.
Right. What is he trying to accomplish?
Just for the sake of, it's how far can he go?
He's a mean one,
What?
Mr.
Yeah,
Grinch.
I kind of have this concept that he has been trying to figure out part of what his experiments were. We're sort of trying to figure out why the world broke down after the war, you know? And now he's come to a place that's, we'll say like 200 or 300 years farther along on the degradation scale than the planet he came from was.
Hmm.
And then with the new magic system, there's something about that, I think, that he really latches onto, whether that's like, here's a
Creating
real,
life in his own image.
yeah, creating life in his own image. Here's an answer for God. If I can imagine it, can I make it? Especially with these I kind of think about, Seth, do you remember the Play to Live series, which is a JRPG book series? JRPG is a book that talks about a person who lives in or is heavily centered around a virtual reality video game,
Oh,
right?
cool.
So dealing with things like being in the game, cultures in the game, and then moving into things like getting stuck in the game, your brain being uploaded to the computer, stuff like that. It's like a whole genre that's come out, not recently, but semi-recently, that I've really enjoyed a lot. But anyways,
Yeah.
in it, it's wrong. It's impossible to make cigarettes in the game
Oh, yeah.
because there's children and because it would unbalance the economy. So what the player does is, instead of trying to make the recipe in the game for cigarettes, he makes the recipe in the game for like
The Emperor's Smoldering Delights.
Emperor's Smoldering Delights, and the flavor matches are like perfectly and so he like gets seaweed and this little bit of this thing, and he adds it all together, and then he lights it up, and then he can put it in, and it tastes like a cigarette when you smoke it, and it's like he becomes instantly rich overnight.
Yeah.
Right? Because all of these people who are stuck in the game, especially like these old war dogs, right?
Yeah.
Who are like stuck in the game now,
Yeah.
are like, I haven't had a cigarette in 10 years.
Yeah.
You need to give me one of those right now. But in the same way, Quincy is trying to find a recipe for something.
Crack cocaine. No, I don't know. Yeah.
No, not crack cocaine. But he's trying to find a recipe for godhood. He's trying to
Yeah.
find a recipe for control, for immortality. There's something he's looking for a recipe for, right? And it's requiring disgusting ingredients, right? That
I think
are
maybe from the
obviously
last
immoral and
one,
wrong.
one of the things they were looking for, because they were studying the gates,
Right.
and one of the things they were trying to do was not just go from point 1 to 2, but actually through the fabric of time, right?
Okay.
Or alternate, not a, I really like the idea of alternate realities, but almost like a, not just stepping through from destination to destination, but to other points in time, either future, past, right? Kind
Right.
of like traveling through time or to a different dimension or concept of reality, by using that gate idea,
Yeah.
because
That
it
could be
is like opening some kind of a wormhole through space time. But until they're trying to figure out how to not just open it from one destination, but then kind of swim through it back to something else, or to open up portals really to whatever.
Yeah, that could be it. I mean, and it could be as simple as, I want to get to the end of this. What book of the Dark Tower are you on?
Songs of Susanna,
Okay. And you've heard of the Breakers?
maybe.
Okay. So
It's
the
it's
cri-
been a while,
the
so
Crimson the
give me a
Crimson Ki-
refresh. I don't think.
yeah, the Crimson King is the enemy of all humanity, right? He existed outside of the structured world back when fairy magic held all the worlds together.
Mhm.
And his goal, his job, his purpose, his, in fact, just entire being, is to see the beams broken, the tower fallen, and all of reality thrown into discordia, right? He's not going to rule it. That's not the point. His plan isn't to conquer it. His plan, and he has to like build businesses and have people in order to make this happen, but to worship him is to wish for everything to go away, right?
Going 19.
Yeah, basically. So that could be a part of this thing, is that Quincy wants to get to the bottom of this. And if that means like breaking it, then that means like breaking it. You know what I mean?
Because if he
Like,
can break it, then he can put it back together in his own
yeah,
will
or it can
or
just be
fashion
broken.
in his mind. But
Yeah, that I'm not saying that that's what it has to be. Anyways, I like that. It's
Hey.
kind of a role reversal. The villain is now kind of this trying to be this savior of all mankind thing. I like it.
Okay.
Reed, do you want to do yours, or should I talk about my fighting style?
I'm gonna throw mine in. This guy, I had to go back like 4 years. According to my notes, this was an episode recorded December 29th of 2020. So that was almost exactly 4 years ago.
Nice.
Just over 4 years ago. And okay, the name of the character is Lord Ravenous, and the way I described him back then was he's demonic. He's a character that is in rebellion to the creator of all things, but he's advanced. He's got skill. He's skilled at appearing physically beautiful. He's sly. His specialty is subjugation. In his view, lesser beings were made to be ruled. And he currently has control of like a dozen sentient species, mostly primitive inhabitants of a single planet. But he's got 2 groups that are more advanced, multi-planet systems, and he's on the prowl for new people to enslave to increase his status with the system lords. It's the other demonic forces that are, basically in rebellion to the creator. But
What story is this from?
I didn't write down the name of it. I would have to look it up. It was probably posted the beginning of 2021.
2021. Okay, I'll look it up because I don't remember this at all. I believe you, but I just don't remember it. So this is like a bad guy?
Yeah, he was the villain in that story.
this sounds like maybe Quincy opens up a portal and brings this guy over.
And well, anyway,
Yeah, I could see that.
he's looking, and I'm seeing initially Lord Ravenous is coming kind of incognito, kind of checking out what he's got here. Is this going to be a plum ripe for the picking, or is he gonna be biting off more than he asked for?
Right.
Anyway, I just thought he was an interesting character, and I just thought it'd be fun to bring him back.
So the episode that came out on 1/12/2021, which is the first episode of 2021, was called Old Nanny Assassin. It doesn't sound like that one, but that's fine. That's cool.
Grandma Ruth is 70. She's the villain's sidekick.
Yep, that's it then.
Yep.
Old Nanny Assassin.
Yep.
Great. I got to go back and listen to these. So that's interesting. So I like the fact that he is in control of an entire planet. The solar system that these 2 planets are in could have other planets in them,
right,
that are, due to this in some way. What were you thinking he would, what position do you think, this is perfect for a villain, but there's already a villain. So what position you were thinking he would take?
I think he's just scoping out. Like I said, he's got a dozen planets of like less developed planets, and he's got a couple more developed planets. I think he's just scouting out, new people he can subjugate.
Gotcha.
So I think it would probably work well if somehow in one of these portal things, if he's not here directly, if it's somehow something that almost like in Lord of the Rings, where you've got Saruman kind of taking orders from
the Palantirs. Yeah.
From Sauron with the Palantirs, or however you say that.
Yeah, I'm thinking he's like, part of a group. He wants to show off and, increase his power, and so he can kind of throw his weight around among the other. I use the word system lords. I'm thinking of like Stargate, like the
Goa'uld.
The Goa'uld, yes, exactly. So that was kind of where I was headed with it.
Yeah, I like that, and I also like the whole Palantir thing, because like Quincy could have some information, the villain could have some way to talk with him, and he's kind of quote unquote helping people along, to gain certain ability or to gain certain power. And then we could see that maybe some of the people that they were fighting against in the previous world,
right,
who seemed to have like weird knowledge or the ability to understand things that we couldn't, all of a sudden it's like, oh, that makes sense. They were probably also talking to this guy or others.
Yeah.
I kind of like that. He's a meddler. He's someone who isn't quite involved, but he is ready to get involved.
Yes.
That's great. So what do we think for how the story is going to go?
Well, are you going to explain your fighting style?
Well, once we get to it.
Okay.
I'm trying to put all these things together. So do we want it to start it right when they arrive at the planet? Or do we want to the last book ends with them going and then the next book starts, or the story, whatever, starts, a year later.
Yeah, see, this is because of the I want to say apocalypse, but actually we used a different word for it. The Seth, you used a word for what happened in the old there was a catastrophe like thing. That's not the word you used.
Cataclysm?
A cataclysm.
Cataclysm. Okay.
Yeah. And so we're in this post cataclysm. So it's sort of like pioneer time. The guys are going over there and they're not finding like, the warriors. You got a warrior class and they're like starting from scratch, right? That's the way I'm seeing it.
My thought was kind of like an Arrakis or like a Mars.
Yeah.
It's just like barren, broken landscape. And if you
Right.
kind of like Paralandra, where it's like a barren, broken landscape, but then if you find the crack, the oasis, you can kind of get down, and then there'll be like a forest.
Malacandra, you mean?
Malacandra, yeah. In this kind of fissure, because it's protected kind of from the environment, but even that's kind of receding sort of year by year.
Yeah.
Because this hole in the firmament is kind of wearing away at the environment.
Yeah.
That was my thought.
That's just that C.S. Lewis space trilogy, Out of the Silent Planet. That was really well developed, I thought, considering, when did he write it was it
36?
Yeah.
36 or 39. Maybe the next one came out in 39.
But it's really set up to be that, like, in my brain, I think of the Aiel Waste, I think of Arrakis, I think of 40 years in the desert. I think of like a hardening,
right?
A hardening up. The people are much more efficient with their time, much more efficient with their desires, with their killing, with their manufacturing. They would scoff at the waste now
of the wetlanders from the other planet.
Yeah,
basically they would, because they haven't had it,
right?
And so at first our heroes and people are kind of it's difficult and shocking, because it's so difficult to live there. But then as they live there for longer and longer and longer, you learn the lessons and you start to replicate the good sense, and then you start to thrive, and then the story can take place, but it's all framed with this kind of A, suffering, B, everyone who entered into the gate was already an absolute master warrior and survivor. I kind of like that idea. It's like they're being prepared for something,
Yeah.
So I think maybe how it starts out is they come in, and then almost like the opposite, where, because I like the idea of, the Seabiscuit, or what was that, the wind skipper? Or...
No, her name is Windsong, and her vehicle, her ship was the Ocean Flyer.
Okay, so except it's rigged up where they're like sailing it now on like through the kind of the more rough desert of it. So they still catch the wind, and they're kind of like riding some of the dunes, and they're riding around. And maybe it picks up several years later where they've just been kind of going around. They haven't found anybody yet.
Wait, so they're riding the ship through the dunes?
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. I'm down.
Because it's got that magic
magic
metal on it, right? Which then,
it does,
perhaps then adapts itself to that. And I mean, it's a sailboat, right? So it just has to pick up the wind. So I'm thinking of like this, like rugged, like Northwest Passage kind of thing. Maybe they've kind of run into a few traders that just kind of like, oh yeah, you just got to go, that way. Well, what's that way? Is it west, east? Or it's that way. You just go there, because they've had this trail. Maybe they've picked up a couple, people, but not really. Again, it's just the ruggedness of it, and then eventually as it goes on, they've kind of, maybe come to like a smaller colony, or where one of the groups winter up after, 5 years of, wandering around mostly on their own, only to kind of catch news that, the people they were searching have kind of set up. They've heard that he's trying to do this, and then they kind of hear about it. And then, but like say a little bit of time has gone by where they've just kind of been looking around to give enough time for the other people to kind of get established somewhere.
Right.
So that then they can come in and see what's going on. And probably at the time, really, when they get transferred, would be at about the time where then the upheaval is happening.
Oh, on the other planet.
Which would ultimately be the upheaval happening for this planet.
Right.
So really that first like 5 or so years is that kind of turmoil in between, like then the kind of dying off and then the kind of the good time. And so that's basically, they've just been looking for a safe harbor. And then maybe after about like, 5 years of weathering the storm, they've, found a enclave or a harbor, and then they've been getting some
Right.
information. Yeah.
I had this fun lore idea, or this fun world building idea. Because the firmament was cracked when the giant species made their way into space, you no longer you can't see the stars anymore at night, because there's like, you look up and it's like thin spider web cracks.
Oh, cool.
And so that you see constellations or symbols within those, and then you use those for guidance. Which also is interesting, because the closer it gets to the end of this story, aka the conclusion of whatever terrible thing is going to happen, the spider webbing gets worse and worse and worse, and so that you can almost like look up and see that your doom is coming.
Yeah.
That was just an interesting thought that I had.
Okay.
What if that's the secret to the ways? Is some of these giants that have then mapped out using the sun and the stars to map out the ways between different things on the firmament after they got out.
Oh, interesting.
But by doing so, also weakens the.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100% weakens.
Just had like this idea of where like somehow they like get back out there and there's like a enclosed colony or something, and they've just got like like living on the outside of it, but like in space, but on the outside of it, and then they're like trying to see what they can, or maybe originally seeing what they could do to repair it, but then in some of the cracks, maybe that's what opened up the ways.
Or maybe
Begin
it's
with.
maybe the use of the ways, like that's what opened it up, and the use of the ways sort of borrows energy from these seals that are meant to sort of keep things secure. It's kind of like if you have a big battery keeping your jail closed, and everyone wants to charge their phone, and it's like, okay, everyone can charge your phone and we can plug your house into it, but just so you're aware, as soon as the battery is out of juice, the jail is going to open up. So
Yeah.
jail or cage or whatever, with the dangerous thing inside. So it's like, sure, charge your phone if you want, And that also kind of plays in with Quincy's whole thing, because he has this timeline that he wants to get things done by. We'll talk about the fighting style now. So since fighting and combat is a huge part of this culture, because everyone is either a challenger of the mountain or of the mountain man, or is a child of a challenger of the mountain man. The fighting style is essentially drink a bunch of different potions and then tank a bunch of damage. So the special metal, I don't remember what I called it, that was developed from the last story that allows you to like read people's minds and stuff. Not a lot of people have those swords. Those swords are pretty rare, so you don't really use that sort of fighting style. But what you have is any clan worth their metal will come up with their clan's cocktail.
Right.
Right? And oftentimes it'll emphasize certain things that their clan is good at or emphasizes. Like if your clan is extra tall because it's not inbreeding, but there's, if the genes that are passed around your clan are tall genes, then your fighting style is going to be different than if you're shorter, right? And clans are based on families, and families have hereditary genetic traits. So
you used an expression earlier. Did you say they drink a bunch of potions and tank damage?
Yeah, I'll explain what I mean by that.
Okay.
And so each clan has their specific cocktail. And I would say each clan also kind of maintains a lot of people are nomadic, but they also all maintain a sort of dojo, right? That is kind of their, which is, the dojo is essentially a family tree. And so it denotes them and their genetic legacy to be connected to families or fighting styles. And so each one has a cocktail, and that cocktail is a secret, and by a cocktail, I don't mean like a Manhattan or a gin gimlet. I mean a specific mixture of specific quantities of specific potions mixed together to kind of augment the body in a specific way that you train for, right? Because a person who trains to be 10 times stronger than they are is going to be much more efficient once they are 10 times stronger than someone who does not,
Right.
And so within there's each clan, And then typically each person will augment their own cocktail specifically to them, right? So they'll get, if they're going to travel outside of their CH or their, their hold, I imagine like a stone fortress underground or in a mountain or somewhere protected from the elements. Before they leave, they would receive an amount of that cocktail based on their rank or whatever. And it's like, you need this because this is what helps you perform according to how the clan is going to be represented, right? And then each person will typically augment the cocktail slightly to fit them specifically. So one guy might do a little bit more speed, little up the speed potion a little bit. Another guy might do a little bit more eyesight, Typically as clan members get older, certain elements of the cocktail will be augmented to help them if they're going to be in a fight to deal with that, sharpness of eyes, something that binds the bones, something that strengthens the bones. It's like, it's good to have a bone strengthener if you're going to be in a fight where possibly a guy is going to swing a 150-pound sword at you. You want to, if you get hit with it, you're going to want to make sure your bones are strong so you don't break every bone in your body. And that's one part of the fighting style. The second part of the fighting style is that there is no metal on this earth, on this world, because the angels, the microorganisms, the engines of creation were previously outside the firmament, and when it was broken, they started to stream in. These are unclaimed, unorganized organisms. They're rogue organisms. They just consume things like iron. So there is no iron. There hasn't been for years. So everything's wood.
Except the swords that the guys brought over?
The swords that the guys brought over for a very limited time. If they're oiled correctly, then they're maintained. But then the swords of the special element, those aren't affected by that. But iron, I'm speaking specifically iron, just doesn't exist. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm not sure, but you're saying that there is no new source of iron. If the only iron implements were what they brought with them.
Yeah, I would say if you brought an iron sword over there and you didn't oil it religiously, or like find some way to keep this kind of just like pathogen that just exists in the air off of the iron, it would start to like get brittle and decay and then soon just break, right? Because these things just exist in the air, just destroying the ecosystem, just consuming these specific elements. So does that make sense?
Yeah. So food, I'm thinking like, for example, people that come, bodies are designed to manage certain trace amounts of certain minerals. And metals just won't be part of it in the new diet.
Yeah, or maybe they are part of it, but they are made and then consumed immediately, Maybe they're made, so it's like you use a house, I called it, like an inoculation. You inoculate something, and it changes the elementic property of this soup, right? To make it super nutritious and to give it everything you need, which includes iron. So you eat it as soon as it's made, and it goes into your body, and your body absorbs the iron. If you were to leave it out on the shelf for a week, all the iron would be gone. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Just be problematic for hemoglobin-based blood cells.
Right.
Yeah.
What's I'm saying? It's like incredibly cruel and terribly inefficient. Like it's bad. It's a terrible world. And it's not even in like a disaster time,
Right.
This is the like profitable, fruitful time. So the second part of the fighting style is, so real quick, tank the damage. What it means to be a tank is to be the person in the party who runs forward and gets everything to attack him instead of the sort of softer, more squishy, kind of like casters and stuff.
Right.
So a tank will drive up and everyone will start shooting their guns at the tank, and then you can shoot the guys who are shooting. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, okay.
So when I say tank the damage, I mean, like, that's the kind of fighting style I would have. I would have a bunch of like stone skin potions, and I would just take those, and then I just run into the fight, and everyone would attack me, and then all my allies who are more powerful attack-wise but weaker defense-wise could attack those guys while everyone was focused on me, the big guy who looked really scary.
What's the, like the Mandalorian, Boba Fett, what is their stuff? Their
Beskar?
Beskar, right. Yeah. Beskar armor.
Yeah, so that leads us, that's kind of on this thing. that leads us to the second part of the fighting style, which is, what are the weapons made of then? I'll tell you what they're made of. When it is
Snakes
time...
and snails and puppy dog tails.
Yes. Raindrops on roses and whiskers on kittens. No. When it's time for a young adult to become a man or a woman and be initiated into the warrior class, they are sent out into the wilderness to find a chunk of the firmament, right?
Ooh, yeah.
Which, when they were falling from the sky, if you could have been there thousands of years ago, when they were falling from the sky, they were 5 or 6 miles thick glass. They looked like glass.
Yeah.
Right? Now they're mostly covered in sand and dunes and other things. But if you can find them, you have to break them apart and bring the material back enough to make a weapon out of. And it's transparent, right? When you look at it, it's transparent. It melts. It can be formed. You can't form it by hammering. You have to mold it. So you have to melt it and pour it into a mold. But you have to use special coal treated with special liquids, with special potions made by very rare and very special angels, So you make these potions and you soak the coal in them, and then they get very hot. And then you foundry out these weapons, and they end up being, kind of black obsidian weapons. And they're incredibly hard, and they're incredibly sharp. They maintain their sharpness, and that's the weapon that people use. It's they harvest these chunks from the firmament, and they bring them back and then make their weapons out of them. So I would say maybe the story should have some element of that, like our heroes are, here's my idea. The story starts, they come into the world and it's nothing like they want, and there's a bit of a scuffle, there's a bit of a fight, there's a bit of a breaking off, as the villain is going to go off here, and as Quincy kind of like goes insane and all these things, and then they kind of like all go different ways. None of them really able to like defeat each other or willing to risk defeating each other.
Yeah.
So they sort of all go in separate ways, and then it picks up a year or so later as our swordsmith hero, is kind of like he takes his sword out and it like finally snaps, and then you receive the download as to why it snapped.
So So like I'm off there into the wilderness, and I find like a place where a chunk of this is jutting up, and I'm able to like break off a shard of it,
Right.
so to speak.
Yeah.
And I have this image that it's extremely hard. The sharp edges are extremely sharp.
Obsidian level sharp. Yeah.
And you bring it back, and then you have people that are skilled in the use of this process to superheat these shards to the point where they can be molded.
Yeah.
And then they will like enhance their strength.
Yeah,
and mitigate the brittle aspect of it.
Not everyone will be able to break off a piece that is like a sword.
Right.
A lot of people will spend weeks smashing with a chisel that's made of this stuff and a hammer, and just get like little tiny pebble-sized pieces into a bag, and then have pebble-sized pieces, and then bring them and have them all melted down and fashioned into knives or swords or whatever.
Yeah.
There is a method. I'm looking it up. You can make like an arrowhead out of like the flint or glass.
Napping.
And it's like napping. Yeah.
Yep.
You chip the edge away, and I think that might be how they do it, because it could be a hard material, but by then getting something, a rock or something that can
that could
chip
work.
the edge. So a lot of it, that's why then they have to melt it down, because they can get like a bag of it, but then they have to bring it back and do something with it.
Yeah, maybe they
and
get it and then they turn it into a blank, a piece that's the size of a sword, and then someone goes through and naps it and breaks it down into the actual sword shape, It could be like this. They melt it, they pour it into the mold, and then while it's cooling down, it reaches a place that you can handle it, but it's not all the way cooled down yet. It's like you have a week to nap it and turn it into something. And after that, it won't move unless you melt it down again. And so then you do the napping to it while it's still a little bit weak. And then as it cools, it's now set in stone after a week or so.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a good idea. So that's what I'm saying. The story, we have the kind of breaking, and then it picks up with our hero finishing this or going out on this quest or and that's where it kind of picks up, is he's going out to do this work, because that's kind of what you have to do. And maybe he has his sword still, Because doesn't he have a sword made of that metal? Didn't I say that he had a sword made of that metal?
Yeah.
Possibly.
I don't
It
remember if I
makes
s-
sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he
So
does.
I'll say he does, but he doesn't want to use it because that metal is incredibly valuable.
You're talking about the metal from the other
Yeah.
planet, right?
Yeah. And so he's like, I need to sort of not let people know I have this.
Yeah.
Or maybe he's there with another person to help them do their thing. I don't know. I just like the idea of it picking up a year or so later, maybe 2 years later, and then retroactively explaining things as the story progresses as to why things are so terrible, where the Seabiscuit is, what the Seabiscuit is doing, stuff like that. And then we'll have to figure out what the story is. We're at 45 minutes now, so maybe we should wrap it up. But we'll have to figure out what the story is next week. And really, I think I like this. I like the story before A New Dawn, and I like this story as well. So I want to sort of continue this on, making sure that we give it all the time and effort we need to. Sound good to everyone? Anyone else have anything to add?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. If you want to hear from us, give us a call at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or add us on Twitter at @getsbettercast. We'll see you guys later. Bye.